How's it going, everyone? Roslyn here. Today I'm going to be going over some general combat advice, as well as provide you with the builds I personally used myself in my Trails in the Sky first chapter playthrough. Now before we get started, I just want to note that I did play the game on the Nightmare difficulty. I bring this up because the decision informed my strategies, playstyles, and builds I used for my playthrough, and therefore the information that I'm bringing you today. But don't worry, everything is of course still applicable to easier difficulties if you aren't playing on Nightmare. Anyways, another decision I made was to partner with Figgies. If you would like to know more about Figgies and the pixel art collectibles they have to offer, stay tuned to the end of the video. For this video, I'm going to structure it in two parts. In part 1, I will be going over general combat advice, and then in part 2, I will be going over my builds for each character. So with that out the way, let's begin with the general combat advice. When in combat, especially against enemies you're unfamiliar with, it's a good idea to spread your party out. This will help to minimize damage from many of the AoE attacks that enemies in Trails in the Sky first chapter have. Your first encounter with Josette and later the Kapua family as a whole are two early examples of encounters that showcase the importance of spreading your party out in battle, as doing so will drastically reduce the difficulty of those fights. Along the same lines, don't be afraid to aggressively reposition your characters in battle, whether it's to fit more enemies into an AoE attack of your own, position your party members to receive the benefits of AoE healing and buffs, or, once again, to minimize incoming AoE damage. Movement is a key part of the battle system that you should definitely be making use of. Another key part of the battle system to be aware of is Rage Boost. Rage Boost is a nasty buff that boss and mini-boss enemies get whenever their HP drops below a certain level, usually around the 50% mark, but it can vary per enemy. On higher difficulties, even a single enemy in Rage Boost can quickly lead to the battle spiraling out of control. Because of this, you want to make sure you're prepared to handle it. When fighting a singular boss enemy, having access to the Art Anticept is a must. Using this on a rage boosted enemy won't dispel the rage boost itself, but it will remove the extra stat buffs initially provided by rage boost, minimizing its impact. When in battle against multiple boss type enemies that can rage boost, it is recommended to take them down one at a time so that you don't have more than one enemy under the effects of rage boost at the same time. This will prolong boss encounters, but it will also make them significantly less deadly. Yet another key aspect of the battle system are the various AT bonuses you can get on your turn. In particular, 0 arts and guaranteed crit. 0 arts will allow the user to cast an art for 0 EP and have 0 delay on casting. And guaranteed crit will do just as you'd expect, make your next attack a guaranteed critical hit. And while these are great for you, they're not so great when your enemies get them. Luckily though, you can steal AT bonuses from enemies. Inflicting delay on an enemy will steal any AT bonuses they may have, but a more surefire way of doing this is to use a craft that naturally has steal bonus built into it. These include Estelle's Comet, Olivier's Quick Draw, and Tita's Jamming Ray. Since Estelle is in your party for almost the entirety of the game, she will naturally end up being your go-to AT bonus stealer. Finally, since we are talking about stealing enemy AT bonuses with steal bonus, we should talk about S-Crafts. Every character's S-Craft except for Close has a steal bonus effect, and therefore can also be used alongside Comet, Quick Draw, and Jamming Ray to steal enemy AT bonuses. However, S-Crafts come with a huge delay attached to them. For those that don't know, every action you take with a character incurs a delay before that character can act again. This delay varies based on the action, and for arts and crafts, varies based on the art or craft used. S-Crafts have the longest incurred delay, and using a character's S-Craft can easily put them out of the fight for multiple turns. Because of this, I generally recommend not using S-Crafts all that much. They are flashy, and can have some powerful effects, but the risk of effectively losing a character for multiple turns in a row is usually not worth it. Luckily, this downside is rectified in later games in the series via quartz and master quartz that reduce the delay on using S-Crafts. Moving on to my character builds, I first want to mention a couple rules of thumb that apply to all or almost all characters. First, every character should absolutely have the highest tier action quartz you can craft equipped, whether that's Action 1, Action 2, or Action 3. Action increases a character's speed, and speed not only lets a character act faster in battle, but it also reduces delay, which in turn leads to them acting faster. Simply put, speed is the best stat in the game, and the action quartz increases that stat. The next thing to mention is that almost all characters should aim to have a 100% hit rating. This can be done via hit quartz, accessories, or a combination of both, but it should be a top priority regardless of how else you may be building a character, with the only exceptions to this being Close and potentially Sherazard. In Close's case, the only craft you'll ever really be using with her is Vice Aura, and maybe her S-craft if things go really bad in battle. But neither of those are offensive crafts, and therefore hit rating isn't necessary for her. For Scheherazade, it depends on whether or not you want to use her offensive crafts. Both Sylvan Whip and Bind Nail can be quite useful, and so I do recommend getting her hit rating to 100%, but if you plan to use Scheherazade as a pure arts user, then you can technically forego hit rating on her. For everyone else though, always aim to get 100% hit rating. Alright, onto the builds, first up with Estelle. Estelle is a character that, for most of the game, is relatively well balanced between both strength and ATS. And this works to her advantage as magic is very strong in this game, and her best craft, Comet, deals magic damage. Because of this, I aimed to make sure she had access to a wide range of arts, as well as the ability to use them effectively. To this end, Cast 3 and EP 3 are chosen to boost her EP pool and reduce delay on casting arts. HP 3 and Sweet Aroma do double duty. For the purposes of giving Estelle access to a bunch of different arts, they provide the necessary elements to get access to a bunch of different arts, with Sweet Aroma in particular being very valuable for this. But I also wanted Estelle to fill the role of the party's tank, seeing that she's in your party for almost the entire game. Sweet Aroma helps accomplish this by making enemies more likely to target her, and HP 3 helps to ensure she stays alive while taking hits for the party. Now you may be wondering, wouldn't Jean be better for Sweet Aroma? And for purely tanking purposes, yes he would. But I valued Estelle's near permanent place in the party and her ability to have access to more arts over making Jean a better tank. The last quartz to mention is Hidden Leaf, which is there primarily to help with Estelle's tanking. However, this is a very late game quartz, so before you get it, you could swap it with a hit 3 quartz, or just forego Hidden Leaf on her entirely and use a hit 3 quartz instead and free up an accessory slot. With this setup, Estelle is able to tank for the party and adapt to pretty much any situation, whether that be healing, casting spells from afar, or dealing physical damage. Yoshua is very similar to Estelle. He's in the party for most of the game, and he is fairly well balanced between both strength and ATS, though his stats do lean a bit more towards magic than Estelle. Because of this, I built Yoshua as a caster. I did still use his crafts, but a bunch of his actual damage output, especially in AoE situations, came from casting arts. To this end, EP Cut 3 and Cast 3 are chosen to reduce the EP cost on arts and reduce the delay on casting them. Heavenly Insight greatly increases the range of arts, allowing Yoshua to more easily hit enemies with his AoE magic attacks. And Ingenuity is mostly there because it provides access to both wind and fire arts at the same time. If you wanted to be a bit more comfortable and give Yoshua more EP, you could swap Ingenuity for EP3. In fact, before getting it and Heavenly Insight, I used EP3 and Mind 3 in their place. With this setup, much of the game plan with Yoshua was to make use of his stellar speed to provide healing when necessary, and then use strong AoE arts on groups of enemies. This was then supplemented by using his craft Dual Strike to interrupt enemy casting, or Cloak and Dagger if I needed to cut back on AoE damage and single target an enemy down. Much like with Yoshua, Scheherazade is fairly balanced between strength and ATS, with a lean towards magic. One advantage she has over him though is her ability to leverage that ATS for her crafts, thanks to Sylvan Whip doing magic damage. The build you see here though is the more standard build for her that I used in the late game. EP Cut 3 and Cast 3 are of course taken to supplement her ability to stand back and play a pure caster role. And then HP 3, Evade 3, and Arts Defense 3 are taken to beef up her defenses for Nightmare difficulty while also providing access to more arts. If you want to focus more on using her crafts to deal damage, especially Sylvan Whip, then you could drop Cast 3, EP Cut 3, and Arts Defense 3 for Hit 3, Impede 3, and Sleep Blade. This is actually what I did during the prologue in Chapter 3, albeit with lower tier quartz, before making her a pure caster in the late game. If you go with the standard build, then she functions as a pure caster. If you opt to focus on her craft damage, then she mainly uses Sylvan Whip to deal solid AoE damage and cripple enemies with debuffs. And if you want to get really spicy, then you can build her to help you take infinite turns. Moving on to Olivier, he's a pure caster, but due to his ability to steal enemy bonuses with his craft quick draw, he's a pure caster that does want to be at 100% chance to hit. As such, the build for him is very straightforward. Cast 3 reduces his delay when casting spells, and Mind 3 boosts his already high ATS. Silver Shield and Septium Vein are mostly there for their ability to provide multiple elements, Mirage and Fire for Silver Shield, and Earth and Wind for Septium Vein, though the defensive stat boosts from Silver Shield are always welcome. And Hit 3 is again there to ensure that he can steal enemy AT bonuses with Quick Draw. I will note that I chose not to include either EP Cut 3 or EP 3 on him, despite being a pure caster. Before getting Septium Vein and Silver Shield, these can be run in their place, but I didn't include them in Olivier's final build due to his support ability Magnificent Harmony, which frequently triggers whenever he casts arts and restores a bunch of his EP. Basically, they aren't on him because he didn't need them. Agat is a pure physical damage dealer. He technically has an ATS stat that can allow him to deal decent damage with arts, but his physical damage with crafts is so high you generally only want him to do that on 0 arts turns. Agat also has the powerful ability to restore a large portion of his CP in exchange for a percentage of his HP with his craft Wild Rage. In later games in the franchise, this and similar abilities are abused to launch back-to-back S-crafts, but due to the lack of anything that reduces the delay on casting S-crafts in this game, it's mainly used for his other crafts and to trigger the bonus from the Lone Blade Quartz. Lone Blade perfectly synergizes with Agat by giving him up to a 200% bonus damage multiplier based on his missing HP. And if you're feeling a bit adventurous, you can actually use Wild Rage to bring him down to 1 HP for the maximum benefit. So Lone Blade is an obvious inclusion to his build, but in addition I like to run Deathblade and Impede 3 as well. Deathblade lets you sometimes outright kill non-boss enemies, but this can be swapped for something else if you'd like. And Impede 3 lets him reliably interrupt enemy casting without the need to use his Dragoona Edge craft to do so, but this can also be swapped if you'd prefer something else. Some recommendations for those swaps if you'd like to make them would be hit 3 to free up an accessory slot and any other blade quartz with a different debuff. Close is another pure caster and really the only character that doesn't need or want 100% hit rating. This is because the only things you're ever going to be doing with her are casting arts to either support the party or deal damage, and casting her incredibly useful Vice Aura craft, which isn't an offensive craft. As a pure caster, Cast 3 is an obvious inclusion to the build for the reduced delay on casting arts. HP is for survivability, and Mercy is because I had her as the healer for the group, though towards the end of the game, Vice Aura alone almost does that job by itself. EP Cut 3 and EP 3 may seem like strange inclusions after I didn't use them on Olivier, as Close basically has the exact same support ability that he does. However, my Close for whatever reason seemed to be allergic to using this ability, so I gave up and brute forced a fix by giving her EP Cut 3 and EP 3 instead. Ideally though, you would swap in stuff like Heat Haze, Fury, or even move Ingenuity over to her in order to increase the different elements she has access to. Now I haven't talked about specific accessories for any character yet because I did often swap them around based on who was in the party and what I was doing, so in many cases they weren't part of the builds. But for Close specifically, I did give her the Gladiator Belt Plus at all times once I got it, as it ensured she could always renew Vice Aura and have emergency access to her S-craft. Moving on to the second to last character of the cover, we have Tita. Tita is a physical attacking character whose main purpose is to apply debuffs in a wide area. She does have the craft Vital Cannon that heals, and it is a very good craft, but Tita also has a cripplingly low speed value, making it something I only used in emergency situations. Because of this, I focused more on improving her normal attacks, which have a nice AoE radius to them, and Smoke Cannon, which has a high chance to blind enemies. Luckily, Tita's Orbment works well for this playstyle with 3 different lines allowing for up to 3 different blade quartz should you want to use them. I chose to only use Blind Blade and Death Blade as I wanted Impede 3 on her so she didn't need to use her craft Jamming Ray to interrupt enemies as it has the highest delay among her regular crafts. She is also quite frail, so I chose to use Golden Shield for the plus 50 defense and arts defense it provides. However, you could swap Golden Shield for Mute Blade, or even swap Impede 3 for something like Petrification Blade if you wanted to maximize Blade Quartz on her. Finally, we have Jean. Jean is a pure physical attacker who can also function nicely as a tank due to his ability to increase his chance to be targeted via his Taunt craft, and that is certainly one way to build him. But instead, I decided to focus more on his damage dealing capabilities, decent AoE, and access to 4 lines in his Orbment device. With 4 lines, I was able to load him up with 4 different blade quartz: Death Blade, Blind Blade, Chaos Blade, and Petrification Blade. This setup allowed Jean to hit hard and cripple enemies in the process. Now if you wanted to go for a tank setup instead, you'd want to swap in Sweet Aroma to pair with his taunt ability to further make him the target of enemy attacks. And then also consider adding in stuff like Defense 3, Arts Defense 3, and maybe even HP 3 to boost his survivability. I would really only consider this though if you aren't abusing Close's Vice Aura, as that plus a pseudo tank Estelle is more than enough even for Nightmare. And that will do it for this video going over general combat advice and the builds I used in Trails in the Sky first chapter. If you found this video helpful and informative, please be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Also, if you'd like to support the channel further and get yourself some awesome video game and anime pixel art collectibles in the process, then head over to figgies.com where you can purchase collectible magnet figures from a bunch of your favorite video game and anime series. These are honestly pretty darn cool. You get a retro style magnet figure, a reversible metal backplate, and then both a stand and magnet sticker for display. New figures are released in batches all the time. For example, there are figures from Atlas titles such as Metaphor, Persona 5 Royal, SMT5 Vengeance, and Persona 3 Reload. If these seem like something you'd want to pick up, then be sure to use my code RosalindFiggies at checkout for 5% off any purchase of $50 or more. And of course, if you have any questions about this video, Trails in the Sky First Chapter, or any other game that I cover, you can always hit me up over on Twitch at twitch.tv/RosalindGaming, or on my Discord server, both of which you can find links to in the video description below. Until next time, take care.